KSJE is supported by the San Juan Medical Foundation, presenting the Taco Throwdown and Bloody Mary contest, Saturday, August 10th at the Aztec Municipal Golf Course. This 21 and over event will include food, music, and fun, as vendors from the Four Corners battle to see who creates the best taco and the best Bloody Mary. The mission of the San Juan Medical Foundation is to enhance the health and well-being of people in the Four Corners. Tickets are $30. Find out more at sanjuanmedicalfoundation.com.
We have a 911. Armed robbery in progress. See surplus store, corner Peoples Drive, North 24th Street.
Good morning and welcome to the Cop Shop with the Farmington Police Department. I'm Chief Steve Hebbe. I'm flying solo today. Nicole's out of town. Georgette's long since abandoned the show, and I hang in here, because that's what I do. I continue to just trudge along and hold the show down. So to Nicole and to Georgette, wherever you are, I know they're pretending they're at PIO training this week, but here I am on the radio still doing the job. So with me today is a special guest. He's one of the greatest people in all of San Juan County. Is that what you wanted me to say, Dave?
Yeah, that'll work.
Well, thanks. It's Chief Dave Karst of the Bloomfield Police Department, formerly a command level officer with the Farmington PD, but for the last 5 to 6 months he's been doing the chief thing over in Bloomfield. So welcome, David.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
So I wanted to bring you on, first of all, to kind of talk up Bloomfield PD and some of the things that you've seen and learned over the last 6 months about Bloomfield PD. And then let's talk a little bit about what it's like to transition from, a mid-level manager, which, is arguably a sergeant and lieutenant role inside the Farmington PD, to being the man. And it's a transition that you can talk about a little bit, but until you're actually in there, you don't get it all. So how have things been going over at Bloomfield?
The first thing, I was really nervous about being seen as an outsider coming into Bloomfield, because I wasn't a line level cop there. I'd spent my entire career at Farmington, 13 years, and I thought, well, how are they going to receive me here? Especially how are the citizens going to receive me? I was really, really nervous about that, but the citizens were super warm and welcoming. I don't know how many times I got a cake or something sent to the department or a call or a card, from people I didn't even know. They were already just willing to accept me as one of them and give me a chance. Then there was always the stress of, well, what's the officers going to think, I'm taking a position that could have belonged to one of them, because there was at least 2 of them that did assess for my position. Mm-hmm. And, it was amazing. They were supportive and said, hey, if it couldn't be us, we're glad you're here. We like some of your ideas. We're excited for the change. So the whole reception was really good. I was more than impressed and humbled, and I still really am.
It is a humbling thing when you think about it, as you should, as you're coming in, to think that here's a whole thousands of citizens that are putting their trust in you to run their police department, to keep them safe, to keep scandal free, obviously, but to be successful in recruiting and crime prevention and in social outreach. So it is a humbling thing. But I think I identify exactly with your experience. I came from the outside. There were 2 people who assessed for the job from inside.
Mm-hmm.
You wondered how the community was going to support you and receive you, and you wondered how the department was going to support you and receive you. And so, I'm glad you're off to a good start.
Yes, I am. I'm happy. I love every day that I go in, and look forward to the new things that we're working on, all the projects and stuff.
So you had some familiarity, obviously, with BPD, having been in San Juan County your whole career in law enforcement. But still, you wind up seeing the department different once you're on the inside, and certainly at the top of it. What are some of the positive things that you've learned about the department that you really didn't know when you first came in there?
There's a lot of good benefits of that department. When I went in there, I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know what the morale was going to be, because that's always in question. I didn't know what the equipment was going to be like. I mean, I did as much research as I could, but you never know really truly what you have. I didn't know what my processes were going to be, my policies, and I'd spent all that time as part of the force investigation unit and the use of force investigation. So I was really nervous to see, well, do we have a process in there, and are we practicing best standards and stuff? And when I came in, I learned that one thing, the officers they're really young, they're ambitious, they work hard, but they're really dedicated to the community. You know, most of them are from Bloomfield, and almost nearly all of them live there. They could make more money at a different department, but they don't, because they truly have ownership of the city. You know, they know all the business owners, they know the business owner's family, so there's a lot tighter knit community than I could even ever imagine. You know, and I honestly thought that Farmington was really tight with us as officers, but they were there. I learned that most of the officers just needed a little bit of guidance, but they wanted to do the right thing. They just maybe didn't have all the tools or the experience. So that's something that we've been working on.
So one of the challenges for smaller departments can be, you know, getting the training dollars, getting the training resources, being able to send your people off to the modern and best training ideals. And so you're right. I mean, that can be a challenge. As consequently, your younger officers, although they want to do the right thing, sometimes they haven't been given the training to help them with that. But something else that you know, when you walked in there, Bloomfield PD had gone through a period where there was some discussion about whether that department was going to continue or whether the city would contract out to the county for it. And I know I was impressed watching there was an interim chief there at the time, who's I think your number 2 right now.
Right.
But I had a chance to talk with a number of the officers because they were very uncertain as to what was going to happen, and I was really impressed with their dedication to Bloomfield as a community. They believed in it. They weren't jumping, and you could have seen different. You know, they were under some pressure, and they're trying to figure out, what am I going to do, you know, going forward? Are we still going to exist? And that kind of uncertainty can lead to a lot of people leaving, and you just didn't see it much in Bloomfield. You really saw people, I thought, that were commendably dedicated to Bloomfield PD and to the Bloomfield community.
Oh, I agree. You know, that's one of the first things I asked them is, why did you stay? If your future was so uncertain and everybody else was hiring, why roll the dice? And they said, you know, this is our home. We love it here. We're not just going to leave. We're going to ride it out. Times have been tough before, but, you know, we're here to stay. We don't want to go anywhere else.
No, you know, like I said, I was very impressed with how they ran things. And then they worked through it, and they made the decision to remain as a department and posted. And I got to see you as you went through the interview process. I thought they had a number of good candidates, which is a good thing for the community and for Four Corners area as well. When you can attract good people that want to be in leadership positions in the Four Corners area, that's a great thing. But I was proud of you when you got the job.
Thank you. I was excited, but I'm telling you, I didn't sleep for a couple of months. There's 100% truth to that. You know, I was leaving home. I started at Farmington Police in 2006, right after I got out of the Marines, and I swore I would die there, one way or another, and I actually had to make the decision to leave voluntarily early, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't really easy.
You came close. I mean, you were killing me most of the time that I was here over the last 5 years, so you know, somebody was going to die, apparently. That was more likely to be me. But we were talking before we went on the show. My wife and I arrived here. I started March 6th of 2014, but my wife and I arrived a week or so before that, and we were meeting with a realtor, and we were looking at some housing, and we walked out into the parking lot, and there was an FPD car there, and out jumped a corporal at that time, Corporal David Karst, who locked his little heels and recognized him. He says he recognized my mustache. I think he recognized my completely gray hair. But in any event, he was the first officer that I met here at the FPD. So, I mean, it's coincidental. Here we sit, you know, about 5.5 years later.
It really was. You know, I was sitting over there doing reports, and we'd really been watching the hiring process close because, of course, it was what our future was going to be. And I remember seeing you walk by and walk into a realtor's office. I said, well, that makes sense. That's got to be him, and he's got to be looking for a house. I said, well, he's seen my car, so I better go over there and at least say hello. So I did that.
Well, I was trying to be low-key, you know, at that point, because all the things you're talking about, you know, so just strolling up to the car and, hey, I'm your new chief, you know, probably, no, that's not my personality, probably, but I was glad that you stepped out, and so at that time you were a front-level supervisor. Our corporal was in that role, and then you eventually, I promoted you to sergeant and then lieutenant, and then off you go. You know, to be a chief. So, you know, talk about a rocket in your pocket. Yeah,
you know, it was a super fast transition, and nothing beats experience in any job. I think we'll all agree with that. You could have all the training in the world and everything else, but sometimes you just need to have that experience to be able to make the right decision,
Sure.
or hold off on making the decision.
Right.
That's one thing that I've learned the most. But I was super fortunate. I had really good people that I had worked for over the years that I think developed me for each position. When I was a corporal, we worked directly under sergeants. I worked under some great sergeants that really helped me transition into that position. And then as a sergeant, I got a lot of experience in more as an administrative sergeant, so different aspects of day-to-day, not just day-to-day police work, but bigger picture stuff. All right, let's start looking at budget. Let's look at programs. How are we going to change things overall, not just how are we going to run the night. So being in the administrative sergeant position, I think, gave me a lot of experience. So transitioning to a lieutenant, I was already halfway there. And not to mention I got to go to Northwestern's School of Staff and Command, the 10-week program in Albuquerque. I did that right before I got promoted to lieutenant. So honestly, I felt like I was really well prepared. I was used to looking at a budget. I was used to looking at policies and revising them and adjust and disciplinary issues and just long-term, big picture things that I don't think your average street cop doesn't think about, and I sure didn't as a street cop.
So two of the things that you got to experience, towards the end is, one was the use of force unit that we put together. You were the first commander of it,
Yes.
and you saw we had a big write-up in the Daily Times on it as we came up on our first year of actually having this unit, and I'm actually very proud of the way that's evolved from how I first saw it when we started, and you were a big part of getting it off the ground. And then the second thing is you were really instrumental and spearheaded the purchase of our new in-car and body camera system that we're fixing to roll out here within the next 3 to 4 weeks, and which will be the culmination of a project you started about a year ago. And so those are both real learning experiences that officers on the street don't generally get. But as you move up into administration, how do I start a new unit? Why? What do we need it for? And how does that translate? So there's the policies you were talking about. But then also, boy, how do I go about spending $1.4 million in taxpayer money responsibly to upgrade something that the PD is definitely in need of?
It's really true, especially, I think one of the hardest parts of the force investigation unit was being able to sell it to the officers. To them, it was easy to think, well, it's just another internal affairs unit that's going to be watching me. It didn't realize that it's making practices standardized, it's making everything easier to do. There's set directions and set ways of doing things so we can make sure every investigation is investigated, correctly and consistently. So I think that was one of the harder struggles, was being able to get people to buy off on it, everywhere from the line levels to the sergeants. The camera projects, one thing I really enjoy is technology when it comes to policing. I think there's so much future in it, and I think in order to be the best police department you need to evolve, because lack of technology is inefficiency. Well, lack of technology in certain aspects, like cameras, can be dangerous, outright dangerous. I think we'd all agree when, Officer Dave Rock was in his shooting at the hospital, we could see just how volatile the situation was. Well, can you imagine if he didn't have a camera? You would have had cops showing up to a scene where you had a handcuffed person with multiple bullet wounds. How do you explain that to the public?
Yeah.
I
agree.
Even though it's not the truth, it's the perception. So that's huge. So to me, we had used a camera system that we had probably about 13 years. For about 13 years, they got
the
it
in-car.
right, and it was past its shelf life. It really was. And there's new technology out there, and there's lots of companies. But I spent as much time as I could trying to go to each company. I set out a certain number of features and capabilities I wanted that I wouldn't live without. And then I made them compete for it. And, we did 30-day demos with 3 different companies that I remember that fit the criteria. And we had the officers try them out and said, all right, how they work in, what are the drawbacks and stuff like that, to where we were confident in making our decision to go with the company we chose. And like it or not, cameras, they're out there anyways. So the only thing they can do is help us. If somebody's doing wrong, then you shouldn't be doing wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
the camera's a really important part.
So in the evolution of my career, really the biggest step as far as change is the difference between being a deputy chief and being a chief. mean, it was just because you come up through the ranks. You know, I was a sergeant, a lieutenant, and everything's internally focused. You know, you're worried about your guys, you're worried about it inside the department. But even at the deputy chief level, my predominant responsibilities were internal. But once you become chief, you know, you wind up seeing the department differently, and your role is different. So you're the leader of the department, but you're also the public's representative inside the department. You're also, you know, answering to political leaders and several of them, not just, you know, where you, as a corporal, you have a sergeant, as a sergeant, you have a lieutenant, you know, as a relatively monolithic chain of command. But it completely changes when you hit that chief role and you see outside of your agency and the impact your agency has on the public and vice versa.
It's true. There is so much more external stuff than I think most people would understand. You know, you are a liaison between the school district of, you know, the city of Bloomfield. You are the liaison with the other chiefs of the state of New Mexico, you know, with the legislator, city councils, you know, mayors, other police departments, you know.
Other department heads in the city.
Absolutely, yeah, just the department heads in the city alone, but, you know, any other police department. So there's a lot that goes into that, you know, community events and keeping good relationships with the public, and that way you can keep the trust. There's just more than you could ever even expect, no matter how prepared you are.
Yeah, that was definitely, you know, my experience. It was about 5 months, is roughly this time, maybe early August, when Ferguson happened in 2014. And so I'd been a chief, you know, about as long as you.
Right.
And really, it was a game changer. You could see that things were changing. There were more consent decrees. There was more pressure on police departments. Transparency was becoming an increasingly big word. But really, following Ferguson, it was a game changer. Everything changed. So all of a sudden, I was far more out in the public eye, and trying to get out there to show the public, you know, hey, you know, I don't have anything to hide here at the PD. We're going to make some mistakes. You know, we had our evidence room mess, and we tried to be as public and open about that as we could as we went through, you know, predictable soul searching and then policy changes, and then, you know, move forward. So you really had to see, boy, you better be balancing the public and their perceptions, because up till then, through your career, you're worried about the troops, you're worried about what's perceptions internally, and you're less concerned about the outside. It's somebody else's job. Well, it's your job now, baby.
Yeah, you're the face of it. That's for sure.
You're the face of it. So one of the other issues with transparency is, you know, we have had tough times for police. It's been shaky in some parts of the country for their relationships with the different departments. We've talked transparency. We've talked, you know, through the years about the impact that the culture in society these days towards police has on us and our ability to recruit successfully the same people that we used to. And this last week you saw something going on in New York that we're going to pull up on. So if you're looking at the website here for KSJE, you can look live at what Scott has found on the internet for us. This is an incident, but it was one of several incidents. It's embedded in an article that the New York Times is writing, and it's about dousing of NYPD officers. And I've heard a variety of different names for this. One of them was Make Harlem Great Again. And what you see is video after video of NYPD officers being doused with water by citizens. And now this isn't, you know, some cute little thing, because I've been in a dunk tank, you know, and had donuts thrown at me. What you've got is officers actually out in the field. What we're seeing right now is officers were making an unrelated arrest, and just different citizens came and began throwing water on them. And it's bucket after bucket. Eventually, one bucket is thrown at and hits the officer in the head. And this last week has been kind of an interesting and disgusting look at how sometimes relations with the community doesn't do very well, and you're still responsible for your officers.
It's true. You know, I think the chief of police's number one fear is getting that call in the middle of the night that they had an officer hurt or killed. And the second fear is to have it where you and the public don't align anymore. So, you know, I always look at videos like that and I kind of wonder how did they get to this point where that's acceptable?
Yeah.
You know, it's shocking to me.
Well, and, you know, the worst part is this isn't Chicago. Chicago PD's certainly had their struggles over the last couple of years, and the gun violence in Chicago has been very high. The same with Baltimore PD. NYPD has actually seen a declining crime. They had the Eric Garner case a couple of years back, but really they have not seen the tension that you've seen in some of the other big city departments, and they've certainly not experienced the explosion of crime and violent crime. So to see this happening to NYPD officers, honestly, I was just shocked, and then I was angry. And so we're talking internally at Farmington PD. I can tell you, we're going to be arresting if that's happening to any of our officers. Our officers don't come to work to be to take those kind of risks. And for right now, it's water that's in those buckets. But I don't think you have to be too creative to come up with. It could be other substances being thrown on officers. And so where are we as a respectful society towards law enforcement?
Right. It's really true, because when I started in 2006, it was right around when we had an officer involved shooting at Walmart on the east side. With one of the sergeants we had, and I remember the tension. I remember all the detectives and everybody getting pulled out of their divisions, put back into uniform to actually protect a parade that we were going to have that year. And I just come home from the Marines, and I'm thinking, like, what? When did Farmington get like this? So I remember the tensions and how hot they can get. So speaking of that, I really want to say that people are one incident away from that happening anywhere. If you don't already think that it could happen, then you probably shouldn't be where you're at, because it can happen anywhere, and things do happen everywhere. So
yes,
you really got to make sure you're prepared for that.
So you wind up spending a fair amount of time outreaching as a chief, which I certainly have yes. tried to do my best on that, and I think I've watched you as you've tried to do your best on it. And so, overall, I've loved being a chief, but there's pressure to it that you didn't know you were going to have when you took the job.
There's absolute pressure. It's definitely things I didn't think would be the pressurous part, but I've really enjoyed it so far. There's no doubt about that.
Well, we're nearing the end of our half hour, and I want to remind people that we're in the middle of a blood drive right now. It's called Battle of the Badges. It's today and tomorrow. Donate, help out fellow citizens, give blood. We're nearing the end of our half hour. David, I want to tell you, first of all, how proud I am of you, that you've moved on from that little corporal who was lock-kneed when I first came to town to be a big-time chief. So I'm proud of you. I appreciate it. It does mean a lot. You've been really great to me and instrumental in preparing me for this position, there's no doubt. Well, we will have you on the show again, but we're nearing the end here. I want to wish all our listeners a great weekend. Connie Mac's in town. So let's get out. Let's enjoy some beautiful weather that we've got. And if you see Chief Karst, give him a wave. Thank you all for tuning in today.